Welcome to the Let's Chew podcast presented by Gulfood, the largest annual F&B sourcing event in the world. I'm your host, Juwaria Hirsi, bringing you compelling stories and insights to a wide range of topics in the food and drinks industry, from farming, behind the scenes, to the culinary world, and to foods we simply love to chew on. In this podcast series, we speak to people, brands, and businesses across the food and drinks spectrum to find out more about why they do what they do and how, in their own way, they're championing change and shifting the future of food and drink. Trust me, there's so much more, so listen to the Let's Chew podcast on our website, gulfood.com, and subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates in food. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Let's Chew podcast. As always, I'm your host, Juwaria Hirsi, and today we're delving deep into the world of F&B branding, and who better to guide us through this captivating landscape than the visionary founder of Skyen, Dennis Durand. Dennis, a trailblazer in strategic branding with an illustrious 25-year career, has left an indelible mark on iconic brands like Rainbow Milk, Nike, and Coca-Cola. His work, adorned with accolades such as Red Dot and Transform Awards, span industries from FMCG to finance. And here's the catch. Keep listening to know more about the power of branding as we unravel the secrets behind Dennis's success and explore the transformative impact of branding on business results. Today, I have with me the visionary, the founder of Skyen, Dennis Durand. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you for having me here.
It's really a pleasure to have you on the show today. So let's just get started. Could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey to get to where you are today, and provide insights into Skyen and some of the prominent F&B brands that you have collaborated with?
It's a long journey. I just told you it's my birthday today, so I know how old I am. I know how long the journey is.
Yes.
No, my name is Dennis Durand. By origin, I'm a designer, so I have art school. I got intrigued during my study, but actually a little bit before my study already, for branding and packaging. And it was... I once visited a perfume shop with my mother, and I saw these people buying this very expensive perfume, and it looked all beautiful, and they were all very happy with it. And I was thinking, okay, how is this working? Because they pay a lot of money for it, and the content is very little,
Okay.
but they're still very happy. So, and then I wanted to know more about the psychological aspect of how do you communicate with people via colors and shapes and textures and the packaging.
Okay.
So when I did art school in Rotterdam. I'm Dutch by origin. I did graphic design and photography. And then after that, I started working for design agencies. Became a creative director for an international agency, Future Brand. For them, I worked on brands all over the world. So it gave me the opportunity to work in many different countries and understand how you can communicate in an area where you're not familiar with. Because if you work in Asia, then people think different about certain colors and certain shapes and in general in communication. Yeah. So you have to understand how that works in that country to be able to communicate with these people. Yes. I always think that is a very interesting aspect of my job. Because therefore, I learned a lot about different cultures and about people. And so then after Future Brand, I was creative director for an international design company, Design Bridge. They are famous for also branding and packaging. And again, for them, I could also travel the world and live the life of Peter Stuyvesant, as we say. And had the privilege of working for many international brands, for companies like for Unilever, the Bertolli brand, the Knorr brand, for Nestle, their ice cream brands, for Sara Lee, for you name it. And I worked for one of their brands over the years. And in this region, I started working for a brand that I had no idea about at that time. And the brand was called Rainbow. And for me, it was just another dairy brand in a country that I have never heard of, Saudi Arabia at that time. And I started with a project. It was a rebranding project, something like, I don't know, 17, 18 years ago even. Wow. And developed the rebranding and the new packaging, and it was implemented. And till the day today, it's not changed.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's really nice if something is really long lasting and people embrace it, of course. And now if I travel to Saudi and I tell, this Rainbow brand and the packaging, and I say, yeah, we know that's a Saudi brand. And then I say, well,
not really.
It's not a Saudi brand actually, because the origin is a Dutch company, and it's created by a Dutch person actually. Yeah.
That's like a staple for me for all my coffee and tea drinks. So that's really cool to know.
Yeah, and then after that, there comes a moment that you start thinking about your career, and you get these opportunities by headhunters for the same positions as you're in, but then for different companies.
Yeah.
And maybe, of course, for a different salary. But I was like, okay, now it's time to try to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And of course, together with two other people, I started my own agency first in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And the idea was to create a multidisciplinary branding and design company. So not only for 2D, but also for 3D. And also not specialism for one industry, but for different industries. Not in the last place, because I always think that it's very interesting, if you're curious, to learn more about different industries.
Sure.
And also when you have a lot of experience, then you notice at one point that what you learn in one industry, you can implement in another industry, and for them it's completely new, and they would never have had this idea because they don't think about a complete different industry.
Yeah.
If you're in a law firm, you will never think that you can maybe learn something from a food brand, or if you're a food brand, you have never thought that you can learn something for a destination brand. But because we work in all these different sectors and industries, then we can start combining and say, hey, have you ever thought of this? And so therefore I thought it's interesting to have a multidisciplinary and multi-industry agency, which turned out in the beginning not so easy, because people like specialism. Then it's clear what you do. And so, you're a graphic designer, and you have a lot of identities for telecom. So we know what you do, or airlines, and then they come to you for that reason as well. And in the beginning, when I started, we had so many different projects. So they were like, also when I came here in Dubai 15 years ago, it was, by the way, it was a very bad moment, because it was the crash just happened. So everybody was running out of Dubai, and I was coming in. But at that time also, a lot of potential clients said, okay, Dennis, you do this and you do that. And but what is it what you're really good at? And then I started explaining, I'm good in branding and packaging. And I said, yeah, but what is then branding? So you at that time it was really necessary to educate also people on that. And of course, there were also people who had a good base on that, but there were also a lot of people who had no idea, and they just said, "Okay, make me a logo. That's enough, you know." or what do you? How do you make it so difficult for me? Just make something nice on a pack.
That's it.
And that's not how
branding
how I work, or how branding in general works. Of course, it's quite strategic.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, what would you say in like today's competitive F&B market, if we're focusing more on the F&B industry, because most of our listeners are in the F&B sector, what key elements would set successful F&B brands apart, and how does Skyen assist clients in navigating these challenges to stay relevant in today's world?
Yeah, of course. There are many books written and so many platforms where you can find information on branding. Maybe it's also because I'm a designer by origin that I try to simplify things and try to make things not so theoretical, but maybe a little bit more practical.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always try to explain to clients is that brands work the same way like people. So if we meet each other here, then we have a little conversation and we try to find out in a few sentences who you are, where you're from, maybe how do you think about certain things, because then you know if you have things in common, and you create a base of trust or an emotional connection even. And I think with brands it's exactly the same. It's if you look at brands, they also have their own personality. They have certain clothes that they wear. They have a certain voice that they speak, and that's the same with people. So if you take that analogy in your mind and you work also in that way with brands, then you can easily look at if a brand works or not, or if an agency who does work for you, if they do the right thing. If you understand your own brand and you understand their personality, then you have the criteria to base your judgments on. And, there's one thing really interesting about if you take that analogy between brands and people, and I noticed that in the mirror today on my birthday, that there's one thing that brands don't have if you do it right, and that people have. That's people get older, and you can see it.
Yeah.
And some, of course, you can do something about it, but most of the time you see it. And with brands, if you do it right, and you really dive into your target audience, and you make sure that you stay relevant for them by knowing how these people live and how they think, and mostly what is important in their life and how can you play a role in that. If you do that as a brand, you never grow old, and you always will stay relevant for them. And that's what we see over time, of course. If we look at the strong brands and the less strong brands, sometimes brands disappearing, then that is what was missing. That they didn't look at how relevant can they be for that target audience.
Yeah. So beyond aesthetics, could you elaborate on the power of branding and share some insights on the products that you design for your clients and what sets them apart, or what would you say is the main things that you have to focus on when you're designing?
I think it's, of course, it's very important that you try to get that emotional connection. And you look at if it is packaging, for instance, then you look at the shape, and you look at the color. First, the color, that's almost 70% of importance for packaging. Then the shape, And then, of course, the communication, the text, what kind of voice do you use? It's very important that something is distinct. You have to be different than somebody else, also as a pack, to make sure that you stand out. And it's also very important, of course, that you're relevant. And so it has to talk to the right target audience. I can make something very beautiful, but if it doesn't speak to the audience that I want to target, then it's a waste of my time. And I think especially if you look at packaging, what is so interesting is that there is a very big contradiction if you work in packaging. And that's that on the one hand, you want to stand out. And because imagine if you go to a supermarket, you have sometimes big supermarkets have 40,000 products.
Yeah.
So imagine that you're there and you're not aware of that. Of course, you just do your shopping.
Yeah.
But you get 40,000 products on all sides.
Trying to speak to you.
And get your attention.
Yeah.
So on an average, we take, I think, 3 or 4 seconds only that we look at something if we are interested.
Yeah.
And then we continue. So it's all, you have to grab the attention of customers very quickly. But also, so it's on the one hand, you have to be very distinct. But on the other hand, you also, with your product, you have to fit in the category. I can make, for instance, a dairy pack in black, and everybody will say, "Oh, wow, Dennis, great job," because that stands out on shelf, and everybody will notice that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the consumer, a black milk pack will be like, I don't trust that.
Yeah.
Because you don't talk the language of the category.
Okay.
So then they will not touch it. They will look at it, but not touch it. So you, on the one hand, you have to stand out, and on the other hand, you have to fit in. So that's always the balance that we try to find. Yeah. How can we create that? How can we come up with something original and relevant for the consumer? And how can we still be true to certain category cues that are important to maintain the trust of the consumer? Because if the consumer doesn't trust you, they won't buy your product.
Even though you grabbed their attention.
Exactly. So on the one hand, you have to
loud. But
you have to come up with something that is interesting. And then you have to put something in that makes them comfortable, like, oh yeah, I understand that this fits in the category.
Okay.
And I find it always amazing to get that in the projects we do.
So what branding or like sort of aesthetic for a product or packaging do you think we should be leaving behind and is being overused?
Oh, wow.
Or maybe clients ask for that. You're like, as a creative designer, I don't think that's...
I since a year or maybe 2 years, I have a little bit of an allergy. And that's when people say, give me minimalist design.
Okay.
And I was like, but why?
Yeah,
no, it's great to have a very minimal design. And sometimes I joke in the office if there are also designers come to us and they show their portfolio and they say, I'm a minimalist designer. And then I say, well, I think minimalist designers are a bit lazy because there's nothing more simpler than minimalist.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not completely true because in certain circumstances and for certain brands, it can be very relevant to minimalist. But overall, I think it's overused. Okay. And I see now I think 2 months ago or something like that, I saw a private label brand and everything was so simple, so minimalist that I thought, how can I choose between your I don't know, your mayonnaise or your rice pack or your everything looks the
Looks the
same.
same.
And then people could say, yeah, well, that's the private label. Yes, but why can't I have anything nice
Yeah.
in a rice pack or in a mayonnaise pack because it's private label? I think it's the contrary. I think with private labels we
More
can
opportunities.
make the most fantastic things
Yeah.
because you already have the trust of the consumer of the private label brand.
Yeah.
And then you can put something extra in it that is for customers sort of extra to buy this
To buy.
because it
Yeah.
also looks very pretty. And it's,
Very.
of course, it has to be relevant, but also it has to be beautiful because we
Right.
know that attractiveness will sell a product. And I think sometimes people forget that attractiveness is important.
Is important.
It is.
Yes.
It is as important as relevance, but those two together make it a success.
Right. So just no minimalistic design from
Of course, everybody
for
will look now
everybody.
at our portfolio and say, "Hey, but
Anybody who
Dennis."
requests a
Yeah.
minimalistic
And
design, they'll be like,
yeah, I know one product is not in the food category that we recently did that is very minimalist, but there it worked. There it was needed.
okay.
Yeah.
So can you share like some of the successful F&B brands that have mastered branding in your experience?
Yeah, there are many, of course. If I look at our own portfolio or my portfolio, um, I worked for the brand Bertoli, the olive oil brand.
Okay.
And I think what they do still very well is that they're very consistent to communicate on the story of the brand. And although this brand is by, I think for a long time it was part of the Unilever portfolio, but everybody had the idea that it was this very nice Italian brand. And
Yeah.
their origin was Italian,
Yeah.
but it was just a brand from Unilever, from a big factory, and
Okay.
and the quality was really good and consistent. But I think also how they implemented the whole story of their brand, they did it very well, and they did it everywhere very consistent. And I think that's very important. If you have one, we call it a guiding principle for your brand, and if you can be consistent in implementing that is strong. And consistency doesn't mean everywhere the same. I think a lot of people make that mistake that they think, oh yeah, so to be consistent, I put everywhere the logo, and then everything is consistent.
Yeah.
But it's consistency on the brand principles and the guiding principle. And it can be that the brand looks different in certain places than in others. Like if you want to make that link with us people, I look different today as that I look at the sailing club.
Yeah.
I'm still the same person.
True.
And I have the same values, but I just look a little bit different because the circumstances are different in that area.
Would you say there's certain colors that some F&B sectors should not? Because you said, like, for example, dairy product cannot be black. So can you just like some of the
it's not that you can't use black, because I also remember that I did a project once for ice cream, and at that time the ice cream shelf in the freezer was white and soft colors, pastel tones, and these kind of the colors of ice cream.
Yeah.
And there we made a choice to make the pack black because it stood out very much on the shelf.
Yeah.
But also with the color, with the soft colors of ice cream, and that combination made it really attractive. So there we tried it and it became a big success. So it's not
Yeah.
that it is not possible. It's just how do you do it? How do you make it relevant, and how do you take into account um, the category?
True.
Yeah, but
That's why we need
I think
experts like
I
you.
think every color
Yeah.
can be used.
All right. So, what emerging trends or technologies do you see impacting the future of F&B branding and marketing? Specifically, if you can just share the latest Web3 AR technology in assisting food brands with their supply chain and packaging
Mm.
challenges.
Yeah, I think especially on packaging, and we are also already starting with that, is AR.
Mm.
And of course, we are all used to scan with our phones a code,
Mhm.
and then we go to a website or we see something. But I think in the future, and it's already possible, you will be able to scan with your phone the shelf, and then immediately something will pop up based on that you have your camera on a certain pack.
Okay.
And from there, immediately a video will start playing, or somebody will explain to you that there is there is a discount, or there's something special about this product, or if you come home and you turn the pack and you put your camera on it, and it will explain the recipe for it. I think these things will be implemented very quickly from now. I think in the next year, people will see that more and more and more. Yeah.
Okay. Any other packaging
I
trends that you see that's
yeah,
increasing?
of course, it's not a new trend, but the sustainability. I think, especially in this region, people are more and more aware of what kind of material is the pack made of, and how is that in line with our environmental ideas.
True.
I think that will be in a few years' time. Also in this region, it will be just a given. You will be surprised if this
It's
brand
not.
is not doing the
Yeah.
good thing for the environment.
Right.
So I think those things will continue. Yeah.
Okay. So for F&B listeners, what practical tips can you offer to help them build a strong brand and engage their audience? And where do you see the F&B branding industry heading in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think for building a strong brand, you need the emotional connection, the distinction, and the consistency. That is really important to look at that. But to start, you have to start with a good strategy. So another example I thought of was what we did for the Batil brand, the date brand, and especially on the packaging side, they had a certain packaging style for many years, and then they wanted to sell more also in Europe and be more interesting for the European consumers. And they realized then you have to come up with a different type of pack than they had. We looked at the product, we looked at the European consumer, and why do they eat dates? Because it has a different relevance for them than for the consumers here. It's here it's embedded in the culture, and in Europe it's just a superfood, they called it. So then we played on that also. Okay, so it will be seen as a superfood. It will be seen as more organic or more healthier. So we developed their packaging in a more healthier style, and a more organic like style, so that consumers would understand the language. Because if you want to be seen in a certain way and you start dressing in that way, then consumers can think, hey, that's interesting for me. I want to try that. And it helped them enormously. They start being very successful now also in Europe.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. And you were mentioning about Shifa brand as well.
Yeah, the AlShifa honey brand. Yeah, we recently did a rebranding, which we were very honored to do that. because it's I think 40-year-old brand, or maybe even older. And they are also available in many countries all over the world. And they wanted to rebrand. And we started investigating, of course, how is their appearance at the moment, what are the good things about the brand, and especially if a brand is quite old and people are familiar with it, you can't just change it. Yeah. You have to understand what can you change and what is necessary to change. One of the things we saw was that especially the shelf impact was not so strong. If you would look at it from a little bit of a distance, their branding would almost fade. You would not see it. So we looked at how can we create more shelf impact with their brand, change their typography in a way that the consumer would feel that they're modernized. They entered a new area.
Yeah.
And but that it would still be their AlShifa that they know. And that it would not be like, oh, this is alien, certainly.
Yeah.
So we created first, of course, their brand strategy. Then we worked on the identity, and then we worked on the packaging designs, and we created a packaging design system, so that although they have so many different types of honey, that all the packs feel like a family.
Yes.
And that you recognize the brand, and then you recognize what type of honey this pack is for. And I think that's also, of course, especially in packaging, it's very important that you have a very clear design system. Yeah. And it's something that consumers won't feed back to you of, oh, this brand, what do you think? Yeah, it has a great packaging design system. No, it's not what they get, but they will feel it when it's wrong. Because then they can't, they don't understand the segmentation. They can't find their way in your portfolio. So if you do it right, it's good, and they won't tell you. If you do it wrong, immediately you will know it.
Yeah.
And for AlShifa, they did it really, really good. And it's now on the market. Yeah, so let's hope for another 14 years.
Let's hope for no feedback, then it's positive.
Or no, I shouldn't do that, because it's not good for business if my brand stay that long in the market. Yeah,
you need rebrandings. Yeah. All right, we are coming to the end of the podcast. It's really a great episode having you here. So in your experience, what is the trickiest F&B product to market for your clients, and why?
The trickiest. Yeah,
it's challenging.
Yeah, I always say in the office, like when we get a briefing for a project, then I say, okay, is there a possibility that we create an identity for this brand that is bad? Because every client asks me, of course, to have a very positive brand personality, and so I still dream of creating a real bad brand, like a brand that is not so social, it's not so friendly, it's rude. It's like, that would be fantastic to create. I don't know for what sector we can do that, but that would be very nice. And I think I had an example of a trickiest challenge we once had to do. And it was actually here in the UAE. When I was working here, I think only a year or something like that, we got a project for, let's say, a famous UAE water brand. I won't mention the name. But, and the marketing director came to me and he said, oh yeah, Dennis, I have a new project for you. And we need to start right away, and it's we want to create a crisp range.
Crisps.
Oh, okay. And it was a water brand,
That's
And I was like,
that's a challenge.
this is not possible. How can you how water? It's
Yeah.
healthy. It's natural. It's like, and then you go into crisp. That's the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's not possible. And then he looked at me and he said, Dennis, my boss told me it's not a question.
Get it done.
Get it done. So he said, I'm telling you, it's not a question. Get it done. So we dived into this, and I found some interesting things, also culturally, that it made it possible to do it, because the brand was not so linked to one specific product category.
Okay.
If we, for instance, if we see Coca-Cola, we can't imagine Coca-Cola something else, doing something else than drinks.
Yeah.
But with this particular brand, because the DNA of the brand was not so linked at the category, but it was more linked on a base of trust for this brand.
Okay.
As being a UAE brand for a long time, and so you could trust it. So we saw that there were some openings to do it, and then we looked at, okay, but if you do it, you should distinct yourselves from other crisp brands that are not healthy. So you have to come up with a crisp brand that is healthier than others, and then you have to also start communicating that in a way, because the whole procedure to create this healthy crisp was more expensive. So the price of the crisp would also be more expensive. So it should also look a little bit more expensive then.
Yeah.
So, and then after the strategy, we came to the conclusion of, okay, this is the brief for creation. And we came up with this crisp packaging range.
Yeah.
It was brought into the market, and then we found out that actually we were too early, because if you now go in the supermarkets, you will see all kinds of healthy crisps, and for quite a high price. But people buy it because it's healthier. And they still like crisps. Yeah. So if they can afford, they will buy it. But at that time, there was almost no one who did it. So. And it was not communicated, let's say, so well that it didn't become a success. But sometimes you have that situation challenge. The challenge also that if you come up with a good idea and it's not at the right time, then it can still fail. Although it was a good idea, but it was not at the right time at the right place. And I think with a lot of innovation, that is as important as having the great idea. It has to be relevant for everyone, and otherwise it doesn't work. Fail. Yeah,
I agree. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Let's Do podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you on the show, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you so
birthday.
much. Yeah, thank you.
I feel so privileged to have you on your birthday. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the last episode of Season 1 of the Let's Do podcast. Please don't forget to share your thoughts and leave us a review. Stay tuned for more exciting stories from the world of F&B in the new season. Expect food futurists and iconic culinary and F&B powerhouses. So until then, bye for now.